Hello again, ladies and gentlemen. Michael Matt from Remnant TV, and this is the follow-up. It's a new show where we're going to take a closer look at just one point from our latest editor's desk, a point that a number of you had questions about. And in this case, it's a situation here in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which is not good, but which could become a model for cities all across this country if old Uncle Joe Biden continues with these ridiculous policies of his.
Just understand, what you see in Minneapolis is what they're trying to do across our country. Misery is a political strategy for the left.
So tonight, I want to turn the tables just a little bit. Turn the tables on the far left. I know, we're all sick and tired of being on defense all the time. So let's just turn this around a little bit, and let's ask a question. Since minority communities, mostly Black and Hispanic, are hit hardest by these lockdowns, is there maybe a racial element here that should be considered? One that our overlords aren't too crazy about us looking into? What do you think? I mean, think about this. Liberals, they never get enough of telling the world that we conservatives, now we're racists. Even if we don't know we're racist, we're still racist. There's nothing we can do about it and all that. Well, if that's true, and I don't think it is, but if it is, let's go with them for a second here. They would be susceptible to that as well, right? So maybe they don't even know how racist it is to lock down America's inner cities, to lock people down from minority communities, lower income communities who don't have the advocates, who don't have the power or the influence to do a damn thing about the lockdowns, because that's what we're seeing. I live in a suburb. The lockdowns aren't nearly as hard on me as they are for the folks in the inner city. So why do they continue the way they are? I mean, even local media now here are admitting that the crime spree that is Minneapolis 2020 was directly linked to the pandemic and to the lockdowns.
Now, robbery has increased 59% and rape is up about 22%, again, compared to the four-year average. These numbers were released before a person was killed last night, as we mentioned earlier in the newscast, and another earlier this morning in North Minneapolis. Don Samuels, a North Minneapolis resident and former city council member, says much of this is linked to the pandemic and the death of George Floyd.
And the reality is, if it hadn't been for the COVID lockdowns, we would never have heard the name George Floyd, because this was a guy who had fallen back into drug abuse and depression and lots of mental illness after his place of employment, which I think he was a bouncer, he was working on a bar, after it had been closed by the governor, by the mayor, due to the COVID pandemic, based on science that was thoroughly untested, based on science which now even the World Health Organization admits was disastrous, because it made people sick, it made people poor, it made people's situation so desperate that it was worse than COVID. That's what we've been living under here in St. Paul, Minneapolis for over a year now, especially in Minneapolis. Now, people here are dying every night, not from COVID, but from crime.
Gunshot victims have doubled in Minneapolis this year. Carjackings are surging 331% since 2019, and homicides are up 73%.
78 homicides in 2020 alone. Now, I'm not talking about shootings. That's actual mortalities, people who were killed by gunshots, 2020 alone. Early here in 2021, Minneapolis crime stats already show a 250% increase in gunshot victims, and the vast majority of these are minorities.
14 and 11 years old, a brother and sister killed along with their mother.
Is anyone paying attention to what's happening to these people under these insane, draconian lockdowns just to keep us safe? Well, it's not keeping the people safe who we see lying in the streets of our cities every night, who are dead because of what's going on over there. What about them? And here's the thing that you just can't help but ask, can you? What if they were white? What if these were mostly white victims? Would Minneapolis City Council still be getting away with defunding and even trying to disband the police? You know, one of the Minneapolis City Council members got famous for claiming that calling the police on someone was breaking into your house, that's white privilege.
Burgess, good to have you here tonight. I remember seeing an interview with Lisa Bender, the head of that city council, and she said that, you know, the expectation that when you call 911 and that the police would come to your aid was just sort of smacked of white privilege. What do you make of all this tonight, Burgess?
Well, you first of all listen to statements like that. It's a total lack of common sense. It makes no sense the things they're doing right now. There's no science behind the lockdowns. What Americans want, very simply, is freedom and security. What they want for us is riots and lockdowns.
They're getting rid of the cops and they're saying, you're going to like it. Well, guess what? The folks who are doing the suffering, who are getting shot, who are doing the dying over there, they don't want the police disbanded.
One by one, 8 North Minneapolis residents walked out of the Hennepin County courtroom for a hearing in a lawsuit filed by the residents against the city council and mayor, demanding the city fund and employ enough police officers to patrol the street. Residents are hoping something is done to curb recent crime.
For residents to step up and say, if you're not going to save us, we're going to demand that you save us.
So who are these supremacists that think they get to tell the Hispanics or tell the blacks or tell the minorities, you don't need cops, we'll take care of it? They just kind of think nobody's going to notice if they line up in front of the federal trough to receive the bailout dollars from the government because they need to protect the people and the most vulnerable living through a pandemic, which, by the way, has a 99.5% survival rate. So the people in the inner cities are going through this hell on earth so that the governors and the mayors of this country can collect federal money and no one's speaking up for these poor folks? And it starts at the top. President Biden himself has promised now massive federal action against those domestic terrorists who trashed the Capitol on January 6th. Fine. But is it because on January 6th, the folks being terrorized were mostly white folks in the Congress and the Capitol building with power and with some influence? Could that be why Biden's jumping into action now? Because what about the domestic terrorists who are tearing Minneapolis apart?
Do the people in your community feel safe? Do you feel less safe than you did before this all started?
I do. I feel less safe. A lot of my friends I talk to, and they're not feeling safe right now, and they're not, with this cutting the budget down to $8 million. They're not with that either. Neither am I.
Yeah.
Because we need protection here.
Sure.
And especially in my community where I live. Yes.
So again, what is this if not some form of racism? Systemic racism in the Democrat Party. And they project all that racism all over us all the time. It seems to me maybe they're the ones who are doing this. Because as a conservative, what they're doing to people who can't fight back under these draconian lockdowns is sick, is perverse, and looks mighty racist to me. The white guys who run our city have shut down inner city schools. Brilliant, guys. Get them all out of school. Take the kids, throw them out in the street, see what happens. Keep them safe. They've gotten rid of youth sports. They get rid of health clubs now, gyms. Heck, they even removed the basketball nets from many of the inner city public parks. They went in there and took the basketball nets down months ago. So the guys can't even play basketball. This is a recipe for social chaos, a recipe for disaster that these Democrat loons are putting in place. Now, in this case, in my city. Now, think about it, friends. Many of these poor kids, they live in projects. They live in public housing. They're not in a position to fight back or stand up and do something about this. They got nothing else but some of these things like school and after-school programs and sports and the gym and basketball in the public spots. That's all they got. And it's totally been removed. And we're so shocked and scandalized that crime has gone through the roof. What do these Democrats think was going to happen when they tore out every possible outlet for release from the lives of these kids? Kids who know very well that they have a 99.9% chance of surviving COVID. They're not afraid of COVID.
This week, Governor Walz indicated he would put sports on a pause. A lot of parents and student athletes await those details.
The Minnesota GOP released a statement this afternoon saying that Governor Tim Walz's unilateral decisions to shut down our economy again are disconcerting. They went on to say that shutting down youth sports is probably the worst decision that Walz has made throughout this pandemic.
Heck, now they're even masking these guys up outside. Where's the science for that? Remember when Fauci was saying you didn't need masks at all unless you were a doctor or a nurse? Now they're saying you must wear a mask out in the street. Outside now. And what do you think that does? Other than embolden inner city gangs, and we got plenty of them in Minneapolis, it emboldens these gangsters to cover their faces and do what they want with impunity.
Surveillance video shows a group of 6 pile out of a car, hoods up, masks on, ready to commit their 4th robbery of the morning.
Friends, if somebody wanted to destabilize our country by totally destabilizing our inner cities, this is how you do it. This is exactly how you do it. And at the same time, they're sowing all this class envy and race warfare, race wars, pushing all that as well. This is a powder keg, friends. It's not going away, not getting any better. And again, in terms of the crime rates, most of the victims of these crimes are from the minority communities. And this is why the minorities are the ones who are speaking out loudest against insanity like defunding the police.
Yeah, the police have to change, but we also need them desperately. And we have to realize that life is complicated like that, and we have to have an even-handed approach. Otherwise, the folks who do not have that executive function, who don't have self-control, they're going to then begin to take matters into their own hands.
But of course, Governor Tim Turn the Dial Walz says he's just dialing it back to save the elderly, or dialing it up to save the elderly, locking up the restaurants and the bars. And that's all coming again, of course, because Bill Gates already is telling everybody, now that everybody's herd immunity is shot to heck, of course there's going to be another wave, of course there's going to be another strain. So they're setting this all up again, and we're going to sit back and just wait for it to happen, I guess. Well, I'm not going to, but in any case, it's going to happen again. And guys like Walz need to protect the vulnerable and the elderly, he says. Isn't that fantastic? Well, this is the same guy that ran COVID patients through nursing homes through much of 2020.
Well, the governor has been criticized for allowing hospitals to discharge patients recovering from COVID-19 back into nursing homes.
Seems like he really does want to save those elderly, doesn't he? He's really, really concerned while he rakes in the federal dollars to do all this nonsense. You see? Okay, you want to save the elderly folks, Tim? Well, what about the young folks? Because you know what? Lots of us just don't have the capacity anymore to get worked up and concerned about 90-year-olds in nursing homes when we're watching our kids being exterminated on the streets because of your policies. Young people dying every night. Young people out of school. Young people out of work. Young people out of hope. Young people with no luck. And you're telling us you're doing all this to them to save grandma. You lying fake. And what about the rampant mental illness resulting from these lockdowns? Everybody's talking about it. Heck, the whole world's talking about it now. What about the drug and the alcohol abuse that's resulted now from the COVID-forced unemployment going on all over the place? What about the domestic abuse that now has gone to the levels of pandemic worldwide? People are trying to stop these maniac Democrat governors, but it ain't easy. We got a good guy here in Minnesota, Representative Eric Mortensen. He's moved a resolution to end the peacetime emergency used to justify Governor Walz's unilateral control of the entire state. And in a recent article, we'll throw it up on the screen, the representative writes, quote, "The effects of Governor Walz's unconstitutional and immoral executive orders have rippled across the state, resulting in thousands of businesses closing, tens of thousands of people forced out of work, and mental health issues skyrocketing. We've had months where suicide in progress calls are up over 50%. End quote. And read the rest of that article. We'll put the link below. See, this is what's going on here in the real world, you know? And all of this, according to Governor Tim, this is allegedly is to save the elderly who are most vulnerable to COVID. Maybe they should try following the science for a change, because what they're doing right now is not science. The science and the doctors, they know very well now, a year into COVID, how to take care of the most vulnerable.
And frankly, according to the scientists, the real scientists who are actually doing the research, we look at people like the Bhattacharya and Gupta column in the Wall Street Journal, the end of the pandemic is in grasp here, which is just vaccinate and protect the people who are high risk, and everybody else can restore life back to normal. This is the rational, sensible way. We have a virus here that has a target audience, if you will, of high risk. It's not true that everyone's at high risk from this virus. It's not true that, for instance, children need to be locked out of in-person schools. You know, the data is in. It's been in for months, by the way. It's nothing new. And yet people just say the science, and they don't talk about the actual data or don't know the data.
Makes sense to me, doesn't it? Now, keeping schools closed doesn't make any sense. Keeping schools closed is wrecking kids' lives, traumatizing them in ways we haven't even begun to imagine yet. The influence, the impact of this. Masking up little kids, having little kids grow up looking at all the adults in their lives wearing masks. Can't see smiles, can't see humanity. We don't even know what this is going to do to the next generation if it doesn't stop really soon. And things, in a way, things are looking up. Governors, the governor of New Jersey, the governor of California now have been successfully sued with respect to the cases for those who are saying open the churches right now. So that's been great, the churches and the synagogues, and I'm all for that. But I think it's time now, friends, that these guys, these maniacs, these maniacal governors and mayors of the Democrat Party, it's time for them to be sued for another thing. They need to be sued for the wrongful death and psychological abuse of tens of thousands of young people. And let's get this conversation started. There are a lot of lawyers out there. There are a lot of people who are sick and tired of what's going on. Let's go on offense. You know, in Minnesota, it just seems like it's a no-brainer right next door to us. The governor of South Dakota, Kristi Noem, she never shut down her state. She's got no spiking homicide rates. Her streets are safe. You can go in any city in South Dakota. I just did it a couple of months ago with a friend of mine. Beautiful. It's paradise. The old normal is alive and well. Kristi Noem's schools are open in South Dakota. And for all practical purposes, the pandemic is over in South Dakota.
Well, the pandemic is basically over in South Dakota. Look how far down cases have dropped after the peak in November. And the death rate remained below Cuomo's New York without any lockdowns at all. And like its viral caseload, South Dakota's unemployment rate has also fallen. It's now well below where it was before the pandemic. They are so annoyed by you. Why is that? And why do you have a target on your back when it comes to the American media?
You know, Laura, I really think it's about control. They have used for the last year fear to control people. And in South Dakota, we just took a very different path. We knew the science told us we couldn't stop the virus. We could slow it down and protect people who might be vulnerable and make sure we had enough hospital capacity to take care of those who would need it. But that we were going to do it together and allow people to be flexible to take care of their families and still put food on the table. So, you know, that was a unique approach that for our people really worked well. We did have tragedies and we did have losses, but we also got through it better than virtually every other state. And I think the media hates that.
And then there's Governor Tiny Tim out there, putting politics ahead of lives or whatever he's doing. I don't know if he's a racist or not. Maybe he doesn't know he's a racist. Whatever he's doing, his policies are hard on everybody, especially the minority communities. So maybe it's that, or maybe it's just his massive, gross incompetence. I don't know. But the guy is more deadly than COVID-19. We're all finding that out the hard way, no matter how many times he moves his dial. You know? And he treats everybody like fourth graders. This guy's a piece of work. So whatever the thing is with this guy, I don't know, maybe he's just nuts. I don't know what it is. But it needs to stop right now. For our sake, for the folks in the inner cities, for the minorities, for everyone. It needs to stop.
Every single night on any block in this neighborhood, you can hear gunshots every single freaking night. We are a community that is ridden with crime, and we are under siege.
Which is why we here at Remnant TV are joining our voice forcefully, adamantly, immediately to all of those who are calling upon local law firms, victims groups, families groups, family of victims, you know, to file wrongful death lawsuits against the state of Minnesota today, against this out-of-control, maniacal governor today. File the lawsuits. Get the conversation started. We need to go to war. We need to go on offense against these guys. If somebody doesn't stop them, they're just going to keep on going like the little Adolf Hitlers that they are. You see? And if these guys, if they don't stop the madness on their own, then we need to get in there and stop it for them. We're done with defense. We are on offense.
Let's remember this, Governor Walz. You say that you are going to save us from the COVID. Governor, we would rather die of COVID than die of tyranny. We will
I'm Michael Matt for Remnant TV. See you on the front line. God bless you. We'll see you next week.